Welcome back, MTG Joe here. We're here for another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This video is for standard best of 3 traditional standard. If you're looking for best of 1, we had a video earlier in the week. We also do this for other formats, Explorer and Historic. And with the new Alchemy drop, we'll give it a couple days, see if the new cards made any impact to the Alchemy meta. But usually Alchemy is not too popular, but we'll throw out a video here and there as relevant. So this video, like I said, is for standard best of 3. We're going to be getting our data from actually 3 sources today. As always, we're going to get the data from MTG, which is a companion tool that tracks win rate data for Untapped from MTG Arena ladder. So this is all the way up to mythic data that we can aggregate. It does like deck tracking for your own games played if you're interested. The link is in the video description down below if you want to get started. I'll paste all these deck lists as well. We're also going to be looking at a recent standard MTGO league at some of the 5.0 deck lists. And then we are also going to be looking at a tournament that happened over the weekend, the Pizzabox Open Standard. It was a 128-person tournament that actually at one point had 300 people registered and a bunch of people on the wait list. And this was a tournament that I actually commentated the top 8 on. The video of the top 8 is on my channel if you want to check it out. And then there's these tournaments, they're free to play in. With cash prizes. I'll link those future tournaments as well if you're interested in signing up to those. So before we jump into all the data, quick and friendly reminder to folks, if you haven't done so, I am on a goal to hit 10,000 subs on YouTube by June. I am closing in on 8,000. So if you haven't subbed to the channel, it literally takes you a button to click, costs you nothing, helps out the channel. And if you are subbed to the channel, thank you. And as always, if you can, just drop a like and comment on the videos. It just helps with the YouTube stuff on the back end. So let's jump into it. We're looking February 21st through the end of the 28th. So this is pretty much wrapping up the end of the February season. At this point, it's late in the evening that I'm recording this, so the ladder is already reset. So kind of the end of the month with people making their push into the top 1200 Mythic. From Untapped, we have 25,000 matches played. That is between 50 and 75,000 individual games of Magic because it's best of 3. We're looking Diamond to Mythic rank at this point. Some folks that did comment, like just in terms of the selecting the matches, we can see here, like by doing 100 matches, I'm able to get 9 unique decks. If I do 200, it's only 2 decks. And when we consider just the volume of games played by an individual over the course of the week, especially if there's slight deviations, like Mono Red has a few different versions. So if you start moving cards in and out, it's hard for one person alone to make that cap in a week of best of 3 games being played. So it also helps us kind of look at different variations in terms of decks. But this is more to give you ideas, things that even in small, like somewhat smaller sample sizes can win games. So the top deck of the week is Mono Red Aggro. This makes me so happy as a Mono Red enjoyer to see my basic mountains on top of the ladder. It was actually 2 variations of Mono Red that were 1 and 2. Just some of like the number differences in terms of like sideboard cards, stuff like that, kind of mixed in, but the core of the deck is fairly similar, and it's kind of been popping off on MTGO as well recently. So the deck's got a 65, almost 66% win rate, 160 matches. Again, if you look at like the other version, another 160, and it kind of keeps going. And this is kind of a creature burn hybrid deck. So you have like your Swift Spears, Phoenix Chick, Feldon, that kind of provides card advantage. Your Bloodthirsty Adversary can flashback some of your burn. 4 of Squee, really good into the Grixis matchups. And then 4 Raiju on the top end. 3 Mishras, 2 Sokuzens in your mana base. Then just a whole bunch of burn. Play with Fire, Lightning Strike, kind of dual factor. Can go face, could go creatures, could go planeswalkers. Then some Strangle as catch-all removal. 1 Shivan Devastator is kind of a later game, go over the top threat. Sokuzan, just the glue that kind of holds this deck together, pings, pumps, and exiles things when they die. Your sideboard, Obliterating Bolt is some removal, Bloody Betrayal for like Atraxa, Shieldred, Aos, any kind of the bigger decks. Brotherhood's End against the more aggressive creature decks, so Soldiers, anything that goes wide with things like Wedding Announcement tokens, stuff of that nature. Also good against like the green-white Toxic deck. Furnace Punisher is kind of the tech for the Grixis matchup, or Esper. Anything with like really greedy mana bases. It's a decent body, it dodges cut down, it's a pseudo-evasive with the Menace, and it does some ping damage. Your Rebel Salvos are basically deal with Shieldred or bigger things, and then a Jaya for kind of card advantage in the grindier matchups. We then go to Mono Black Aggro, Midrange, whatever, Mono Black cards, 59% win rate, 100 matches. And this is kind of your mid-range pile that we've seen to some extent. We're seeing the addition of Phyrexian Obliterator as of one of, with the addition of like Mono Red being more popular. This Obliterator's effectiveness is really contingent on the type of decks that are in the meta. When Grixis or Mono White are extremely popular and prevalent, which they somewhat are, there's exile-based removal, there's general removal. Obliterator's not that good, but against Mono Red, against Gruul, against some Soldier decks at times, depending on the removal package, it could sneak in and be an effective threat. You have a removal package of Cut Down, Go for the Throat, Shieldred's Edict. You have your creature package, Evolved Sleeper, Tenacious Underdog, Trespasser. One Bankbuster in the main, so a little bit more built to deal with a creature meta in a way. Lilies, Sorens as Planeswalkers, and a Vraska on the top end. One Flesh Gorger, still your Invoke package, still your Shellies. Two Mishra's Foundries as non-black lines with Takenuma. Your sideboard, Duress versus kind of the Grixis slower mid-range matchups. Extract the Truth can be brought in against any of the like heavy enchantment-based decks, Wedding Announcement decks, stuff like that. More catch-all removal, Infernal Grasp, also decent. If there is any of like heavier artifact-themed decks, you could kind of cut the Go for the Throats and have the Infernal Grasp. Bankbuster for the grind matchups. Gix also is decent in like the grindier matchups or matchups like you're probably not going to see much blue-white control, but if you do, it's decent in that sense because it lets you scale back on removal, and it's a card that needs to be answered and makes your other creatures draw cards. The Malicious Malfunction is brought in the like kind of go wide decks, Soldiers, stuff of that nature. And then Junji is for any of the non-exile based removal matchups. Good against Grixis, stuff like that, since you can reanimate cards as well. Speaking of Grixis, the next deck, and there are many variations of Grixis. Kind of the core we'll highlight, and the numbers are never an exact science, but it's got a lot of options to adapt to the meta. It's how you kind of want to build your deck. You can build it with kind of the more mid-range decks in mind. You can build it as with more of a consideration in terms of aggro decks in mind. It's how you want to kind of situate. Seeing decks vary as much as having 0 to like 3 Shellies. Some are on Invoke, some are on Blade Coil Serpent. It's really up to you how you want to kind of attack the meta there. But the core of this deck is the package of Fable the Mirror Breaker, Corpse Appraiser, Bloodtide Harvester, Shieldred, and some numbers of Invoke. The rest of the deck is just kind of build your own removal package, cut downs, abrades, Go for the Throats, make Disappear to deal with stuff on the stack, Bankbuster for card advantage mixed in. Sideboard again. So cut down, just more early removal, Duress for the mid-range mirrors, Disdainful Strokes versus the big mana decks, Negates for like Invoke Despair, stuff like that. Parasitic Grasp against more of the aggressive decks, good against Mono Red in general. There's Incidental Humans, but also just as like 3 mana Bad Lightning Helix also is decent. Another Sweeper, Kaido Suzuki for the grinder matchups. I've also seen some of these decks start introducing the 4 mana Kaido as well. As another kind of grindier card, Lily, and then Saheeli, just all kind of in the grindier matchups. You usually have some access to that since you'll be taking out removal and a lot of times like cut downs and some number of abrades potentially, or like the Brotherhood's End in the mirror. Gruul Aggro, Gruul Oil, so this is a 57% win rate deck, and this is just kind of a creature heavier version of like the mono red, so kind of no removal. Turn things sideways, smash hard. So you have a modified sub-theme here. So Thundering Raiju deals incidental damage based on the number of things you have modified. You can modify things with like your Pack Beast gets bigger with your 4-drops. Anything with oil counters, Evolving Adaptive, naturally has oil counters from just casting it, and then gets bigger with your other subsequent creatures cast. Quirion Beastcaller gets counters when you cast creatures. Miglos has oil counters kind of mixed in. The Kumano puts counters on other things when you cast. Hajar protects your legendary creatures, so like your Miglos, Screwy, Feldon, kind of all mixed into there. Feldon for some card advantage. Miglos does a whole bunch of things in terms of like evasion, pump, or blow up artifacts or enchantments. Then you have some protection in Tyvar Stand. In the sideboard, you have Strangles for early creature removal, Licensors for graveyard stuff, Furnace Punisher for, like I mentioned, with the greedy mana base, Salvos for bigger things, Luca Nissa package for kind of your grindier matchups. Nissa is also very good against the mono white mid-range deck, and a second Boseiju for like mono white, anything that's heavier in terms of enchantments within the deck. Then go to Azorius Soldiers, as one of my subs always like to call them, wet weenies. Not white weenies, but wet weenies. And this is a creature aggro deck that's built around a soldier sub-theme. Notably, no Myrel in these versions. It's just kind of hanging out at the 3-drop slots. Skrelv kind of introduced in a lot of these decks as a protection spell for your creatures. Also pseudo-unblockable. Some Denix helps to shut off things like the Gix Saga from Reanimating Shield from Traxxas, or any sort of graveyard shenanigans, some Harbins for card advantage. So usually you'll see like this 3-drops, or 2-drop slot have varied numbers, kind of shaving on a Yodian frontliner for some Skrelvs there. Only 2 Brutal Cathars main, which is an interesting inclusion. Siege Veteran and Skystrike Officer. This deck's got really useful mana between like Seachrome Coast, Adakar Way, Secluded Courtyard for multiple dual lands for your creatures, in addition to Fortified Beachhead, which is a dual land and a pump. And then you got some Mishra's Foundries as creature lands. Some counter spells for like your tempo matchups, things with like Sweeper, stuff like that. Spell Pierce, Protect the Negotiators, Denic for both the lifelink ability for like the aggressive matchups, and then shutting off graveyard stuff. Destroy Evil to destroy enchantments or bigger creatures. Some tax effects, some more removal for the grindier, heavy removal matchups. And then for any like heavy enchantment artifact matchup, good against mono white, stuff like that. Then speaking of mono white, we have mono white mid-range, and this is at 55%. So this one's taking advantage of having a heavy plains-based mana base for both laydown, arms, and ossification as removal spells. You have ways to kind of fetch lands and ambitious farmhand, blow up artifacts or enchantments with Cathar Commando. Bunch of card advantage with like Reckoner Bankbuster. Lauren could technically draw you cards. The attacking with like the Wedding Announcement, but lets you go wide. Sarah Paragon recasts all your permanents, including ossification from the graveyard. Wandering Emperor and Eternal Wander is just powerful planeswalkers to kind of deal with the creatures, create tokens, kind of like that angle. AO to kind of be a good attacker, blocker, and then also if it dies, you get to find stuff. So a lot of things replace themselves in this deck, or you can rebuy stuff. And then Seal Seraph for some lifelink, vigilance, or flying. Can be cast as 3-drop or 6-drop. You also have Roadside Reliquary, which is a land that could draw you 1 to 2 additional cards. And if it's in your graveyard, you can also recast it with Sarah Paragon, or replay it, not cast. Your sideboard. Blow up big things or enchantments, creature removal, artifacts or enchantment hate, aggro, and like small low to the ground stuff. Grindier matchups if you want to rebuy stuff out of your graveyard. Another Emperor for like exile, flash threats, especially in like heavy counterspell matchups. Grindier matchups, Elspeth comes in. Farewell as catch-all removal. And then Vanquish the Horde, good against like mirrors, anything that's looking to go wide on the board, since it gets a cost reduction for all creatures on battlefield. So that's it from Untapped. We have now the MTGO leagues, and usually with this, and it's got way brighter than the other screen. We need a dark mode here. I don't go through like every single deck, every single card here, but these are just a bunch of 5-0s. A link, you could take a look, but just kind of highlighting archetypes. We have like another similar mono white mid-range list that we just covered. Mono blue kind of Hadi Jin deck. It's a pretty cheap deck to build. You have a Grixis deck, like I was mentioning. This one's got the Kaido, Dancing Shadow, and Saheeli main board in this particular list. Another card, if you're seeing a lot of Grixis that's really good in the mirrors or like the grindier matchups, is Siphon Insight. It's one of like the mirror breakers from what I am told. I don't play Grixis. Like you can see like a Blade Coil Serpent version of the deck with Burn Down the House main. We see a copy of the Izzet Artifacts deck, the Skitterbeam Battalion, Cityscape Leveler, Artifact Ramp deck. We see mono white, lighter on creatures, kind of more control, heavier planeswalker version of the deck. A card in mono white that you should probably play that looked really good when we get to it from the Pizzabox Open was the Mirex. In all the grindy matchups, it just lets you continually pump out threats. that need to be answered, because you usually like go through all your resources, and then it's like a top deck war, so any extra mana you have, you just pump into this and you could kind of get the toxic win as well. This card looked really good in the mono white deck. We have a green white poison deck, which interesting, has like Charge the Might to make counters for Skrell's Hive main. Skrell's Hive looked really good as well in the sideboard of the mono white deck, just against the grindier matchups. We have a Mardu Modric tokens deck, Fable, Wedding Announcement, Eternal Wander, Rite of Oblivion kind of package mixed in there. Interesting deck there. This is a Jund midrange deck, not the Atraxa Reanimator, but just kind of good creatures. Got a legendary package in there as well. No legendary land though. You do have some legendary creatures, but like Hajar, like decent bodies on their own. Hajar can provide some protection to Glissa, Shielder, the such. And you have Cruelty of Gix to kind of reanimate the best creature from any graveyard in that regard. We have Blue-White Control. Pumpa is a streamer and pretty much always plays control. This version here has got like Mirex, Wandering Emperor, White Swan's Twilight as the win conditions of the deck. So kind of the primary package there. Mono red, like we saw. This one's main decking Furnace Punisher. So just really aggressive there. This is Esper Legends. Then you have like a Gruul deck that we saw. There's a lot of decks here. You can take a look. See if there's anything that interests you from this pile as well. With these, like, someone could go on a hot streak for 5 games, so it's always worth keeping that in mind. Or here we have like hundreds of games, but this is just kind of another look in terms of what's doing well on the MTGO league ladder. And then lastly, the Pizzabox Open. Like I said, we had 128 participants. We capped out. I was actually planning originally to play in it last minute because I had a free weekend unexpectedly. Ended up casting for it because there was over 300 people. And as much as I tried to bribe Pizzabox, MTG, another content creator, to let me in, there was a big lineup. So I ended up casting top 8. And it was actually a really cool tournament. There's a lot of variations of Grixis, and we saw it as the most represented deck at 29 games played. But even going into it, like, none of the Grixis decks were 75 for 75. Grixis overall, despite being the most represented, still pulled out a 59% win rate. Mono Red Aggro was the next most played deck, 57%. We'll look at the top 8 in a sec, but Mono Red just came 9th, 10th in order. Mono White Midrange, good showing, 61% was actually the winning deck of the tournament. Jund midrange didn't do so hot. Azorius Control didn't do so hot. Esper midrange, same. Rakdos had a good showing. Had a placement in the final 4. Soldiers average at best, but then we start going to small sample size theater, kind of mixed into there. But looking at like the top of the ladder, Grixis midrange, Dustin was on a heater. This deck was actually really cool. And so he was using he had a Lier package and then Galvanic Iteration to double cast Invoke Despair. And every time I saw Dustin on camera or like feature match, was just going over the top of all the other Grixis decks, just double casting Invoke Despairs and like 10 balling, 12 balling, drawing a bunch of cards. So this was a really cool kind of innovation to the deck that we didn't see in some of the other ones. If we look at the top 8, you can find all the deck lists here if you're interested. You just hover over and see what all the placements were. But looking at the borders, so we had 3 Grixis. So 3 Grixis, different versions. Soldiers, mono white, 2 mono white midrange, a Rakdos midrange. This ever goes away, and then a 4-color domain with Atraxa, drag to the bottom kind of package. The Rakdos midrange was actually one of the subs here. Josiel had a good run, did the entire tournament on their phone. And their phone was like next to overheating. But Josiel's always been a big fan of Bloodthirsty Adversary. It's kind of a Rakdos mid-rangey shell, kind of paired into that. After the tournament, had some feedback that I was looking to test out Mirex in here, as well as a couple copies of the big slug, the big mythic slug in the sideboard for the mono white matchup. Finals ended up coming down to Dustin on the Grixis midrange versus the mono white midrange, with Mike kind of winning that one. And then the Myrex, like I said, 2 Myrex in the side, 3 Skrelv Hives, really pulled a lot of the weight in a lot of the matchups that I saw they were playing. So that's it for the week. Like I said, there's 3 more tournaments coming up. You can see here, there's the 12th and the 19th, which are standard, and then he's got one more on the last week Sunday of March, which is Explore. If you're interested in that, always best of 3. You can see these enroll very quickly. We're already at cap, so you can get to waiting list. There's usually some folks, they enroll early, but then they might drop. But the last few times we've been hitting those caps pretty hard. Also, like, you'll see the cash prizes from varied tournaments. The one in the second tournament's a $250 US cash prize. So that's it for the week. Let me know in the comments what you've been playing, what you've been enjoying, any feedback. And as always, if you haven't done so, hit that subscribe button. Helps out the channel, helps with the algorithm. Do the YouTube spew, like, smash, subscribe, whatever. I appreciate the support as always. Thanks. Have a great one.